Hey, this is Notser, and this is going to be a video about stealth firing. Now, many people know what I'm talking about, some people don't. Let me just get everyone up to date. Stealth firing is a mechanic where a target can hit another target without being detected by that target. Either the bloom of the shell or the extreme range of the guns allows for this dead zone of undetectability to exist. Now, recently we've been hearing about Wargaming's suggested possibility that they might test or implement a solution for this. And their solution is, quite simply, wherever you can fire, that will be your detectability. There will be no dead zone of damage that you can do or not do. You're just going to be detected, whatever your max range might be. Now, that might sound like a great idea on the surface, but let's consider a couple things. First of all, probably the most simple way to view this, the further range your guns can engage, and I think this is initially addressed to destroyers, but there are some stealth firing cruisers, so they would have to address those as well. At least that's what people have suggested. But let's just assume every ship, they get rid of stealth firing. I don't know that that's what's going to happen, but let's just assume. And let's assume that their solution is as simply as has been suggested. Whatever your max gun range is, that is now your detectability when firing. There is a disadvantage to increasing your gun range in some instances then, because you're not going to be able to hide that you're firing if you're, let's say, a cruiser and you've gone full max range build, 18, 19, 20 kilometer range. That's going to be pretty ridiculous. Something like the VIII, who has a 2 to 3 kilometer dead zone of detectability that they're just not being detected, they're going to be in an instance where maybe you don't go range, maybe you go rate of fire, just so you don't extend it so far that you're basically a battleship whenever you're firing. So this is a very significant change on many fronts of the game, and I just don't understand why Wargaming is even considering doing this right now. I don't think stealth firing is a big deal. There's about 10 to 20 ships that do it, but you're asking to change the very balance of the game itself, and obviously they're testing this. Obviously they haven't put it in, but if you just walk through it logically, there are so many problems that are going to be coming up that they haven't really thought through the solution. The range increase of the guns, making sure that you don't increase it so much that the entire map is detecting you, maintaining that usage of your guns when you fire. That's one thing you need to consider that you've never had to consider before. You've never considered, oh, maybe I don't want to get a range increase on my guns because then it's going to make my guns be detected at a further range. There was a separate detectability related to the ship, and you just learned it. Also, there are some ships that are straight up not balanced around stealth firing. The Germans are definitely not, and they're a piece of crap because of it, but the Soviet destroyers are not, and they are extremely powerful ignoring this mechanic. What's going to happen if they implement the stealth fire changes? The US destroyers are going to be weaker. The Japanese destroyers are going to be weaker. Just because they're taking away even a small minor buff in the existence. So if I'm firing as a US destroyer and I only go out to something like 11 kilometers, 12 kilometers, that's a pretty shallow shot. I don't really need to consider a lot of shells or targets with my shells because they just don't go that far. But as a Soviet, you don't care about that. You don't care. You're so fast, you're so maneuverable, you just operate at an extended range against your targets. That's your goal the whole time. So it's very weird. I know Wargaming balances the range of guns with the understanding that advanced firing training is not going to improve it, or if it does improve it, it's not going to get too insane. For example, the Japanese destroyers, they have a really crappy gun range because they have the best concealment tier for tier generally, and they don't want to have to deal with that. That's a big deal to them. I completely understand that, but my point is There are so many unknowns by doing this. If you change this, the Japanese and the Americans are going to have to be buffed because they're giving up power. They just are. They're giving up power. The Soviet destroyers will be more powerful. The Germans are not going to really get any. I mean, the Germans will get better compared to the Americans and the Japanese, but they're not really getting better. The Soviet destroyers are just going to remain very dominant, and they'll probably be required to play in competitive play. It's just going to be that simple. You have alternative lines with defensive fire, so they replace the Americans in that route. They've got good torpedo range, at least reasonable torpedoes. Torpedoes have been just so butchered that there's not a real fear in ships for torpedoes. They're much more afraid of gun systems, citadels, that sort of thing. The torpedo, hydroacoustic, vigilance, there's so many, just improved play. There's so many ways the torpedoes have become inconsequential. So the gun systems have risen to importance, continue to rise, and they will continue to be very important if the stealth firing is implemented. Now, some of you might say, well, Notser, they're just not going to fire their guns when they're not in smoke, not behind islands, and that works so well for the Germans right now. Yeah. There's a problem. The Soviet destroyers operate in a completely different world than everything else. They don't care that they're seen. They relish it. And I'm sure many people are going to be going, oh, just Russian bias. I don't think they really think like that. I think someone legitimately thinks if someone is firing their guns and you can't see the source of it, there's a problem. They legitimately think that's confusing players to the point where they're not willing to play the game. But what about firing from smoke? What about so many other weird things that occur in the game? Why do aircraft have a strafing mechanic, and why do certain ships take an extreme amount of damage, but others don't? That's sort of a subtle implementation of the armor system. No, Notser, we've explained it. You know, the Warspite takes a lot of damage because that's just what she does. Okay. Why do destroyers not have a citadel? Oh, they're too small. They would just blow up instantly. I mean, these are as random as firing in the open and not being able to see that target. Maybe the curvature of the Earth is blocking the ability to see the target. I mean, I don't know. Just make up whatever crap you want to make up. I just don't know why this is important. Why is this more important than the aircraft carrier balance? Why is this more important than the Japanese destroyers being so weak and their torpedoes just being almost insignificant? Why is this important? A change that's going to buff battleships, buff any cruiser that can't stealth fire, and it's going to nerf everything else. That's what we really need. We need to make battleships better because they're not good enough. It's just a massive change that's going to rock the very foundation of the entire game. And I just don't see the benefit. I don't see the benefit. There's so many weird things that exist in World of Tanks that they're completely fine with. You know, certain classes can move without being seen. There are weird things with bushes and certain distance from bushes. If you have another bush on your side, you're blocking it. And there's just very weird choices that they make. They don't make logic, as much logic as they think it does in their mind, compared to this stealth fire mechanic, in my opinion. What do you think? Do you think that we need to nerf stealth firing when out in the open? What would be your solution for this predicament? You're going to make ships just harder to hit? Increase the velocity of all the guns on the US and the Japanese? Maybe they can operate at better range? I mean, I think the problem is that guns are so good, you want to use your guns. torpedoes have been nerfed so bad, and there's so many systems around countering torpedoes, that you might as well just use your guns. Even the worst gun is better than a lot of these torpedoes at mid to long range. There's just too much time. When aircraft carriers, and if they ever become relevant, come into the fold, it'll be easier to detect. They've put so many things to adjust the balance between the gun system and the torpedo system that it really has discouraged anyone to play torpedo. I mean, I can't think of a single destroyer that is chosen purely for torpedoes. It's always guns and the possibility of using torpedoes in certain scenarios. So yeah, I disagree with this change. I think there's far more important changes that need to be made to the game. I hope that you'll consider this and make a interesting comment that we can discuss. If you have any suggestions that you would like to see changed to maybe help this stealth firing nuisance, I don't know. What could they change that would make a lesser impact on this than the suggested change, where just every single ship goes to their max gun range for detectability when they fire? I don't know. Either way, I hope this was interesting. I really am curious in your thought on this potential change. It's not a guaranteed change. It's just a potential change. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.